when you upgrade how you feel, a lot of that stuff that people focus on so much, he said this to me, and she did this, and and my parents did this, and I don't have enough of this, and my neighbors did this, and all of that stuff, it just fades away when you upgrade the biochemistry.
Welcome to the Rejuvenate podcast. I'm your host, Krissy Hawks, and I am here with my co-host, Elwin Robinson. And today we are talking hormones and neurotransmitters involved in feeling good. So tell me, Elwin, why this topic and why today?
Well, great question. A few different reasons. So first of all, our whole thing is about feeling good. We've talked about that before. It's not about hitting some imaginary biomarker or even living a long time if you're miserable, right? In the end, we want to actually feel good. And feeling good is a part of happiness and long life. There's all kinds of evidence that one of the best things for you is, long-term relationships and social interaction. But from what I can see, mainly the reason for that is because they make you feel good, right? And it's actually only as long as they make you feel good. So feeling good, I would say, is even more of like a root issue. So why now? Well, I want to talk about detoxification soon, probably in the next episode or the episode after it. I feel it's very important, deeply misunderstood, very misunderstood by the alternative community, I think, who often kind of do it wrong, myself in the past included, and then also misunderstood by the mainstream, who kind of think it's not a real thing, and it's people are deluding themselves that they think they're doing it. So I really want to get into that. But the thing is, when you do that, when you start to support your body in accelerating the process of clearing a backlog of poison it may or may not be holding on to, often you don't feel good. And everyone who has been through the experience of detoxification knows that. And so I feel like one of the reasons why it doesn't work out is because one of the reasons it doesn't work out is because people don't stick to it, or they're doing it wrong, of course, as we just said. But one of the reasons that people don't stick to things which would help them, and the reason that we don't is because it feels so awful. So that's the reason I'm doing it now, specifically, directly before that one. The other thing is that I suppose we could technically classify this episode as a little bit of Elwin's experiments, because I've been recently playing with a radical revisioning, re-understanding of the things that I'm talking about today, to seeing it slightly differently, actually simplifying it a lot more. And so the second episode that we ever did, we talked about stress and how there are these three basic modes, right? We've got people think that the nervous system has two modes. That's generally what's taught. That's even what I used to teach, of either active sympathetic or kind of passive parasympathetic. I don't believe that's true. I feel like the polyvagal feeling is more than just a theory. It's very well established, and the only people who are here who don't agree with it is just because people haven't heard of it, which is a lot, right? But everyone kind of gets that it makes sense, and I feel like it will be mainstream before long. And so they talk about the three different modes, right? So there's the shutdown state, which is actually the kind of last resort state, which we call the dorsal vagal state. The sympathetic state that we're all familiar with, which is, despite the name of it, actually where we're amped up. Everything is, not everything, but all our survival mechanism is in an overactive state. So our heart rate increases, our breathing increases, the blood to the muscles increases. So it's that fight or flight state. And then there's actually that ventral vagal state, which is where you are both relaxed, but also aware, awake, present, socially engaged, able to think clearly, sharp, mental sharpness. So basically able to perform well in the world in anything other than an emergency situation. And so every function has its utility, like if you're thrown in a prison cell where, you're in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, you're probably best off in that dorsal vagal mode, right? And, if you are in a situation where someone's actually running after you, you're best off in that sympathetic mode to get away from them. But unless we're in these extreme situations, it's best to be in that ventral vagal mode most of the time. But unfortunately, we get stuck in the other modes. So that's the very brief recap of the stress episode. So having understood that, I started getting into, okay then, so what what are the neurochemicals and hormones related to those different modes so that we can promote the mode that suits us? And so that investigation has actually thrown up some answers which have surprised me a little bit. Now, not totally because of the research that you and I used to be engaged in a while ago, Krissy, where we used to try different research materials in the realm of neurochemicals. So it wasn't a complete surprise to me, and it's not just a theory, I know, because of the experience that I had with that. But still, it's a real understand, like a revisioning of everything that is, understood in the mainstream to some degree about what it takes to feel good. And for those like, oh God, I want to hear some fringe nonsense, Owen. Okay, I get it, but here's the thing. Does it seem like our current mainstream understanding of how to feel good is working, right? With epidemic rates of depression and anxiety and suicide and drug addiction and all the rest of it. It's like when we teach the weight loss thing. Okay, it may seem crazy to speed up your metabolism by eating more. That's completely counter to everything that's taught in terms of weight loss. But then again, 97% of people who do the restriction of calories actually not only regain the weight, but put on more weight. So again, if the system that we're taught, which is just reduce your calories, doesn't work in the vast majority of cases, maybe it's because at least somewhere along the line, there's been some misunderstandings, right? And it's the same thing about what's involved with feeling good.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I admire about you is your willingness to take it deeper, to really immerse yourself into the ins and outs of it all. So yeah, keep going.
Thank you.
So just quickly, can you give us a distinction between the difference between hormones, neurotransmitters, or are they the same? Are they different? Can you just give us a brief little education on that?
Yes, I sometimes call them neurochemicals, but yeah, there is a definite distinction. So there's neuropeptides, there's neurotransmitters, there's hormones. Some things are both, so it can get very confusing. In a nutshell, though. One simple answer would be that if it's got the word neuro in front of it, then it has to be acting on the nervous system, whereas hormones can act on all kinds of other systems, including the nervous system, but also, the reproductive organs, the cardiovascular system, whatever. So anything that's neuro must be working on the nervous system, and often it's primarily the brain. A more practical way of looking at it, in terms of, for the biohackers out there, the people who are maybe going to try some of what I recommend, is that neurochemicals, neuropeptides, neurotransmitters tend to shift very quickly. So you can take something or do something to alter your neurotransmitters, and you might feel difference within seconds to minutes. Whereas with hormones, if you do something to alter those, you're going to feel the difference between hours and days. So they're much slower acting, but that also has a benefit in that they're longer lasting, right? So you can raise a feel-good chemical, but with a couple of minutes, it can be gone again, right? So that's the challenge with doing it via the neurotransmitter route only. Whereas if you optimize your hormone levels, then that's a more stable, long-lasting feeling good. So yeah, that's the practical differentiation.
Great. Really great distinction. Yeah, it's just figuring out, because there are so many that are out there, exactly what they're acting on. And the hormones are mostly coming from the endocrine system, correct?
Yes. So the endocrine system is the glands. We talked about a lot in the hormone podcast episode, I think, which I recommend people watch if they haven't already, to get a recap of that. But that is one of the reasons I want to do this episode as well. Is there's one that I've slightly probably changed my mind about a little bit, so I wanted to also update that one. But to get an idea, yeah. So basically, there's 6 or 7, depending how you categorize it, glandular systems in the body. So the endocrine system is those glands, but the endocrine system does produce neurotransmitters as well as hormones. But hormones, yes, are normally associated with the endocrine system and the glands.
And then you also mentioned about the neurotransmitters coming from the brain, but we also have the vagus nerve as well, correct? Can you talk to us a little bit about the role of the vagus nerve within the neurotransmitter production?
Yes. So the vagus nerve is, so you have sympathetic nerves, which go along from the brain all the way down the spine and then feed into the rest of the body. But you also have what are called cranial nerves. There's 12 of them in total, and they also come from the head, just like the sympathetic nerves, but they kind of come down differently. Generally, the spinal nerves are more related to the sympathetic system, while the cranial nerves are more related to what they used to call the parasympathetic system. But it's in investigating those cranial nerves more, which were less studied initially, that they've actually come up with that whole distinction between the ventral vagal and dorsal vagal. So when we say vagal, we're talking about vagus. And so I think it's CN11 or CN10. One of the cranial nerve, I have to check that. One of those. Vagus nerve is one of the cranial nerves, but to say it's like one of 12, which it is, it kind of underestimates the importance and impact of it, because even though it's only one of 12 cranial nerves, which is one of two systems of nerves, it's actually 2/3 of the modes that your nervous system could be in, if that makes sense. So it's also huge. The name vagus means wanderer. And so it's a wandering nerve that goes all the way down the body, so kind of along here, down here, and then all the way down to the sacrum area. And so when we talk about stimulating the vagus nerve, a lot of the time we're talking about relaxing, basically, to put it simply. But as I said, there's that distinction between the back portion of the vagus nerve, dorsal, which is more the shut you down part, and then the more front part of the vagus nerve, which is the ventral, which is more the being actively socially engaged part of the vagus nerve. And then the other cranial nerves do other things. I studied this a few years ago. I can't give a detailed breakdown of those, but that's it in a nutshell.
So within all of this, is it a good idea to be taking substances or things that are going to alter our neurochemistry in any way?
Well, especially experimental research substances. Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky thing to answer. Is it ideal? I would say actually the answer is no. And that's as someone who does it. And so what I would say is, in an ideal world, we would already be perfect, right? Garden of Eden style. We wouldn't need any adjustment. I think that's a good question, because a lot of people are very wary when you recommend a herb, when you recommend a nutrient, certainly when you recommend a peptide or something that's, borderline drug-like. They're going to be very, very wary. And understandably so. I get that. But here is kind of my counterpoint. Is it a good idea to mess with your neurochemistry to try and feel better? No. But we're all already doing it. This is the thing, right? Coffee, all the uppers that we take to get going in the morning, everything that contains caffeine because we don't have enough energy, because we don't have enough mental sharpness, because we don't have enough motivation. That's messing with our neurochemistry quite strongly, all the things that we use to make ourselves come down, right? Whether it's alcohol, cannabis, Xanax, Valium, Ambien. I don't even know, I'm not really in tune with most drugs, but
there's a lot out there. Let's just say there's a lot.
Yeah. Is that a good idea? Ideally not. All the things that people take for depression, the SSRIs, the other things, is that a good idea? I mean, ideally you wouldn't do it, right? And so there's so many things like that. Oh, and then all the things that people do as social lubrication. Is it a good idea to take cocaine to give you confidence? Is it a good idea to take ecstasy to, make you want to reach out to other people and love them? Is it a good idea to drink alcohol so that you can relax and, loosen your inhibitions and feel more, like you can have fun? Is it a good idea to take psychedelic substances so you can have some kind of spiritual experience or some kind of facsimile of a spiritual experience? I mean, I think we can all agree that in an ideal world, we wouldn't do any of these things, right? Even up to and including the spiritual experience. Ideally, we could all tune into God when we wanted to. Ideally, we could all have energy when we want. We'd all have motivation when we want. We would all relax when we want. We'd all be happy when we want. We'd all, be clear when we want. So ideally, no. And I would love to say that, I'm reasonably confident about this now, that maybe in a couple of years of doing this podcast, because of the specific strategy that I'm doing now, maybe I won't be doing any of these things. I already, as a result of the upgrades that I've done that I'm going to talk about in this episode, I've already dropped a bunch of other things and that I've talked about. And I'm happy to be able to do that, right? Like And so, but my ultimate goal is not having anything to adjust my consciousness, not having anything to feel good. But I was considering this, and I was like, I'm kind of glad that I'm recording these now when I am still doing them, so I could talk about them. Because I remember when I was feeling unwell a couple of years ago, I contacted lots of different people, and one of the people I contacted, obviously I won't name them given what I'm about to say, but this was someone that came highly recommended by someone who I know well, and they're quite expensive, and I spoke to them, and they were just like the most unhelpful, had put no effort into understanding what was going on, gave advice which I had already tried that hadn't worked at all, had just made it worse. And then when I pointed it out to them that this was not really helping me, I'd already tried it and it didn't work, their attitude was, I've never been sick a day in my life, I know what I'm talking about. And it was that specific, I've never been sick a day in my life. I was like, right. So of course you can't help. You have no idea what it's like to be in this position. I don't know why he'd never been sick a day in his life. Maybe he had great genes, maybe he had great lifestyle, really from a very young age, but I don't have those things, right? So I'm in a different position. So for everyone watching this, the goal is ultimately to not need anything, to adjust your consciousness to feel better in any way. That would be great, but you're already doing it. If you're already having chocolate, if you're already having coffee, if you're already having alcohol, if you're already having SSRIs, which most people are, right? They're doing at least one of those things. If you're already having cigarettes or nicotine, all of that stuff, then you're already adjusting your consciousness. So the question is not, is it a good idea? The question is what Elwin's suggesting more effective and safer, maybe cheaper as a cost, less damaging? Those are the kind of things we want to talk about, right? Whereas people seem to have this idea of, taking some drug to alter my consciousness, I'd never do that. Now, let's open a bottle of wine, and it's like, come on, we have to get realistic. Now, of course, I'll steel man their argument and say, what you can say is that, okay, but coffee's been well researched, alcohol's been well researched, nicotine's been well researched. Some of the things that I'm sharing are definitely not as well researched. That is true. But we want to look at the research that's been done on those. A lot of it, of course, is paid for by the people who are selling it.
Yes.
And a lot of it is actually negative. I can find loads and loads of studies that show that alcohol is damaging and detrimental. Same for all the things that are out there. Same for the pharmaceutical drugs as well, right? Look at the list of side effects. So
sorry, that's one of the things here in the States that, every other commercial pretty much is that over here, to bring awareness to it. But at the end, there's always the list of, all of the potential side effects. it can be pretty intense.
So exactly. So what I'm sharing is, and again, I don't expect you to do or want you to do anything based only on what I say, but I'm saying, have a look at this, have a look at this, what about this? And then definitely do your own research and consider it. But again, this probably goes without saying, because if you're watching this, you probably already get it. But like a fundamental understanding is that maybe the people running the governments and maybe the people running the big pharmaceutical companies don't only have our best interests at heart, right? Maybe they're also concerned with profit. Maybe they're also concerned with keeping you dependent on them. Maybe they're also concerned with being right? So they won't change their mind about things. Maybe they were very sincere initially, but after promoting something for 20 years, they now can't turn around and go, oh, the research says actually it's not good after all. So there's all kinds of reasons why you may not being told by the mainstream people that these other options exist, which is why I'm going to share them with you. And I have to do that as carefully as possible, because I don't know how long we're going to get away with being in a mainstream platform, but I'll do my very best. And then who knows, if there's demand for it one day, maybe I'll do like some underground group or something, and we can get together and we can share freely, right? But anyway, that's a long way off as it is right now. But for now, these are just suggestions. I'm going to share with you everything I can on a mainstream platform that actually work, that have worked for me. And again, not stuff that I've just come up with myself. This is all stuff, yes, there is studies and all the rest of it. Anyway.
Well, beautiful. I mean, you did allude to it. You did say, and so this is going to lead me into my next question, or maybe you'll answer it here as we get into them. are there the potential risks involved? I know what you're also asking is for everyone to do their own research, but can you also impart to us, some of the risks that are involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's risks of everything, right? You can die from drinking too much water, too much salt, too much sugar. But what I will say is everything that I offer you, I would say is much less dangerous than what most people and probably you are already doing to get that result. That's what I'm looking for. So nothing is completely free of risk, but if it were not way less riskier than what you're already doing, then I wouldn't recommend it. And again, if you're taking nothing to change your consciousness and you already feel great just through, diet and exercise alone, and you're not taking any chocolate or coffee or alcohol or nicotine or cannabis or any of that stuff, good for you, right? And you may well not want to try any of these things. But I'm assuming that you're already doing this stuff because almost everyone is. And so this, to me, would be a better, much safer version.
Well, yeah, so then that would lead me to my next thing. I mean, well, why wouldn't somebody just focus on diet, a lifestyle, exercise, things like that to regulate their capacity for feeling good or regulate the hormones and neurotransmitters?
Good luck. What? No, I mean, seriously, I don't know. Why don't we, right? There's a few different reasons. I mean, I can answer why I don't, why I think people don't in general. The reason why I don't is because I got into such a bad position with the genetics I started with and my lifestyle during the first 30-ish years of my life and some mistakes I've made since then, that no matter how optimal my diet or lifestyle is, it doesn't do it. I've got a big backlog of toxicity. Some of that is absolutely measurable and confirmed by a mainstream medical GP. So this is really not conjecture, at least when it comes to me, right? Like I've got very large amounts of lead in my blood, for instance. So there are various things for me specifically that mean that just eating well and exercise is not enough. For people in general, I actually think it's the same answer. Like there's this mentality that you see, like this elitism, that people are stupid, people just want a magic pill, people aren't willing to do the work. There's a bit of that because we've been trained to expect that a magic pill should be enough. And of course, if you could get a result with just a pill, why would you put in a lot of effort, right? So as that's what we've been trained to believe is possible, that's what we're looking for. But I think there is also, people are exhausted, people are overwhelmed. As I said, the suicide rates kind of show just how close a lot of people are to a breaking point. So this idea of you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And again, this last position that I give right now is, I know, more controversial from a mainstream point of view. But my understanding is, and this relates to what I said right at the beginning, people are really struggling with a monumental toxic load that they're barely dealing with. And I'm not going to explain and justify that now. I'll do that in the future episodes. But that's my personal opinion about why most people need this kind of support. I think if you could wave a magic wand over yourself and just remove all of the excess backlog of poison, probably most people wouldn't need this. But it's because we have that, most of us. And again, I understand that's not a mainstream view. I will justify that position in another video. But because I think that's what it is, because we have this big backlog, we're barely coping. We're barely coping psychologically. We're barely coping physically. Like if we didn't have the cocktail of drugs, if we didn't have the coffee or whatever, we wouldn't even be able to get to work or function at work. If we didn't have the alcohol or cannabis or whatever, we wouldn't be able to socialize. If we didn't have the, again, alcohol, cannabis, other downers, we wouldn't be able to get to sleep at night, right? So most of us need them to function. We need them to get by. We don't have the luxury of, doing things the optimal way. We just have to get through. Most people are just living paycheck to paycheck, week to week, month to month, just trying to survive, right? That's the situation that most of us are in. And so because of that, and often when you're living paycheck to paycheck and you are poor, and I spent most of my life poor, then it's very easy to want to believe that it's just down to diet and lifestyle, right? Because it's like, and it's very easy to believe, non-organic food is just as good as organic because organic's 3 times the price and you can't really afford it, right? Like a lot of belief systems you take on are like belief systems of convenience because they fit what's possible for you right now. And I definitely understand that as well. But again, as I said, no matter how poor I was, and I was very poor at one point, I was on minimum wage for a long time. I was on benefits for a long time, which is even less. I still managed to get money for drugs. Like, when I say drugs, I mean coffee and, alcohol and all the rest of it, right? Yeah. And most people around me were the same, right? So this is the thing. But again, because we're struggling to just survive. Survive these days is not maybe getting enough calories, as we talked about in the last episode, but it absolutely is about getting through the day without wanting to kill yourself or everyone around you, right? And that's an achievement for a lot of people, being real. And just to relate to what we talked about in the last episode, so I talked about the toxic burden, and then the other thing is, and this is the maybe the easier to deal with aspect of it, we're also constantly modulating our neurochemistry and hormones and stuff with all these substances because we're lacking cellular energy, we're lacking ATP, we're lacking a fast metabolism. So that's good news in the sense that that's a bit easier to deal with, and I talk about how to do that in the other episode. Certainly revving up your metabolism and getting it going is easier than dealing with the backlog of toxicity. That's my understanding and my experience. But however, when you start revving up your metabolism, it automatically starts dealing with the backlog of toxicity and you can still feel bad. So
and then you stop, and then you're like, oh God, that's wrong. And it's like, stop doing that. That's making me feel, bad. That thing's bad. They don't realize that, oh no, you got to take out the internal trash. That's what's happening.
Yes, absolutely. And I know, like, if you're mainstream, you're going to be wary of that perspective. But also if you've been in this world a long time, you're wary of that because you're going to know people who've been detoxing for years or decades and they're still detoxing. And I get it, right? And again, I will explain why that is and how to avoid that when we get to that episode. But yeah, that is my understanding. Yeah, so a few different reasons.
You touched on belief systems. You've also touched on the foods we eat, our exercise, things like that. And so I just want to, go into how our feelings, how our thoughts, how our beliefs, everything's about, it creates the neurochemistry within us. But essentially, feelings, our thoughts, things like that, is it all down to the chemistry that is within us that determines how we feel and how we function in this world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I feel like we've done a few episodes now where I've really focused on the lifestyle factors and mindset and emotions and all the rest of it, and then kind of rushed in some supplement and nutritional stuff at the end. So this episode, I did want to get more into the alchemical, physical transformation of how we feel with, substances you can take, because that's what everyone always wants. But we've talked about this a lot in previous episodes, right? That how you feel, your emotions, your psychology, your habits, the traumas, the way you hold your body, the way you move, the amount you move, all of that stuff does have a huge impact on things. The answer is, if the question is like, what comes first? Is it the neurobiochemistry or is it the outside environment? The answer is there is nothing that comes first, right? As to what ultimately comes first, that depends on whether you have more of a Platonic or Aristotelian view of the universe, right? Do you believe that kind of physicality is first, or do you believe that something other than physicality is first or primary in existence? So I will not try and resolve that. That's a philosophical speculation. But the point is, from a practical point of view, they influence each other, right? And so, going to see a therapist, going to see a spiritual counselor, going to see your religious priest or whatever, imam or whatever, going to see a yoga teacher, going to see whatever, who kind of helps you to think differently, to feel differently, to conceptualize differently. All of those things can be helpful as well. And all of those things can change neurochemistry, right? There's been loads and loads of studies on that. Posture alters neurochemistry, breathing alters neurochemistry, all kinds of activity, exercise alters neurochemistry. So you absolutely can do it that way around. As I said, I feel like we talked about that already for quite a few episodes now. So this one, I want to focus more on people who just want to take something, and there were some recommendations for that. But yeah, it absolutely goes both ways. I will say, because I think this is why you're asking me the question, because we've discussed this before, that I feel that a surprising, if we're talking about less about whether it's taking something or doing something, and we're talking more about just fundamentally, I feel like a surprising amount of not feeling good is actually down to biochemistry. And I've debated this with many people, including my therapist, and we've talked about, because obviously she's been doing it 40 plus years. Her whole worldview is that it's fundamentally down to, using your mind differently, becoming aware of the unconscious, changing how you behave, boundaries, relationships, all of that good stuff, which is all good stuff. But I feel like with certain biochemical adjustments, all of that stuff just goes out of the window. Like, it doesn't even matter. And yet, on the other hand, a person could be in therapy for years trying to, like an addict, right? Like, say an addict will never stop being an addict, right? You're going to keep going to AA, and there's a good chance you're going to relapse, and all of this kind of stuff, right? And I don't want to, sorry, maybe I shouldn't mention that. I don't want to go into addiction, but it's just an example of how these patterns of behavior, which are often described as self-destructive, often seem so hardwired that even if a person really dedicates their life to trying to undo them, that they're still kind of stuck with them to some degree. And I'm not undermining that, and I know that that is true in some cases, and it's definitely true to some degree of everyone, but I'm actually surprised about the degree to which you just make a neurochemical hormonal adjustment, right? And this is especially well known in the area of sex hormones, which we'll actually talk about in a bit, that, a lot of the time when men are feeling all, a midlife crisis, down to the dumps, depressed, that the most beneficial thing they can do is just get on some testosterone, right? And start doing some testosterone boosting activities like lifting weights or playing sports, and all of the depression, all of the uncertainty about life and everything, it just goes out the window. Like, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Sadhguru, he says, when you're asking yourself the question, what is the meaning of life? When people pose that question to him, he always replies and says something along the lines of, obviously paraphrasing, but have you ever seen a person overflowing with joy who questions the meaning of life? It doesn't happen, right? If you're full of, so he says the only thing that matters is just to upgrade how you feel. And he has a whole mnemonic for it, which I can't quite remember and I won't do justice to, but it's basically upgrade your energy until it's ecstatic, upgrade your thoughts until it's, happy. I can't remember. Upgrade your emotions until they're blissful, something like that, right? But once you've done all of that, his point was more that the outside world doesn't matter. But I would also say that when you upgrade how you feel, a lot of that stuff that people focus on so much, he said this to me, and she said she did this, and and my parents did this, and I don't have enough of this, and my neighbors did this, and all of that stuff, it just fades away when you upgrade the biochemistry. It's not that it doesn't matter. It's quite weird. Like, even your life circumstances will change. Like, you may have a horrible boss who bullies you, and your co-workers, treat you like shit. And I'm not denying that. Or you may have a horrible neighbor who makes noise and makes false complaints about you to the police. I don't know. I'm sure you may have a horrible parent who never validated how you feel and, is constantly trying to put you down. All of those things, I think, are true. And in the area of relationships, I do think this is really important, to upgrade your relationships. And we've talked about that in a previous episode, so I won't say it again. But the funny thing is, when you upgrade your consciousness, and you may be able to do it just directly biochemically, like we're about to talk about, then a lot of those things just kind of sort themselves out. Like maybe you just get a better job. Maybe you just move. Maybe you suddenly transform the relationship with that parent, or that parent just kind of fades away in importance in your life. And okay, maybe they're still there, but like their barbs don't hurt you anymore. You know, it's like it just all changes when it can all just change when you change your biochemistry. So I feel like often the root is either biochemical or it is like a brain habit, like a like the metaphor of, you know, you have certain neuronal pathways and they're like a very deep groove that the neurons just automatically go in. And so then when you try and, so if you're used to being miserable and focusing on what's bad.
The habitual pathway, because it's been run so many times.
Yes. So if you're used to feeling miserable and focusing on what's wrong in your life, because you've been genuinely victimized and had genuinely horrible early life or whatever it might be, that's a very deep pathway. And so when you then try and focus on being grateful, try and focus on what you want, try and focus on good people, like that's a not very deep pathway. And so it is much more difficult to do that. And so that's where there's a lot of like discipline and meditation and personal development stuff and affirmation and visualization, all of that stuff to try and slowly build the groove for that habit to go down that path. What I will say is if you upgrade your neurochemistry and your hormones with the kind of stuff we're going to talk about, number one, that process gets infinitely easier, because when you feel happy biologically, neurochemically, you're much more inclined to go down that pathway. And again, I know this sounds like speculation, but I've seen it over and over and over again. Now, if a person is very ingrained with a certain pathway, then what I notice is you give them everything that they need to upgrade their neurochemistry to be happy, they will sabotage it. They will stop taking it. They will take something else. They will still insist on focusing on that negative pathway and kind of sabotaging it. They'll go, "Oh, I don't trust feeling happy. It's not real." Like they'll override it, and usually they'll eventually sabotage or abandon the neurobiological upgrade if the fundamental issue is these ingrained pathways. However, I have been guilty in the past of having a judgment about people that it is an ingrained pathway. Sometimes they've been doing it for decades, maybe more than half a century. And then yet, when I help them to upgrade their neurobiology, miraculously it all goes away. The complaining goes away, the focusing on the negative goes away, the victim consciousness goes away. All of it. It's just so, because of those experiences more than theory, I've come to feel more and more, like a surprising amount of it is just about biochemistry. And so what we have to understand is that those neuronal pathways of misery or happiness, yes, they are neuronal pathways, but they are the kind of architecture that holds them in place is the neurochemistry. And so when you replace the misery, anxiety, unhappiness neurochemistry with the joy, the gratitude, the achieving things neurochemistry, it kind of pulls all the infrastructure away from that neuronal pathway. And it's actually way easier to go down the positive pathway. So now, ideally, you always do both, right? If a person only wants to take a pill or wants to take the things I'm recommending, but they absolutely refuse to learn to think differently, refuse to talk to anyone, refuse to relate to people differently, all of that stuff, the benefits will be limited. But what I see a lot of people, and then maybe this is just my, the bias of the people who I end up around, but they're people who are really trying. They're reading books, they're going to courses, they're seeing people, they're doing meditation, they're doing yoga, they're doing whatever, they're going to church regularly. They're really trying to embrace this productive, positive, happy mode of being, and it's their biochemistry which keeps sabotaging it. So especially if that is you, the person listening to this or watching this, this is for you.
Great. I mean, yeah, because it is that thing of, gosh, if there's something that can help you get to the other side and have it be a little bit easier, then then why not? You know, do you have to have the intense struggle through it and that you may fail? But if you do have something over here that it's potential to help you and make the journey to the other side a lot easier, then what's stopping you from potentially taking it?
Yeah, well, that belief that life is a struggle and has to be a struggle and anything that is not a struggle is not real is very common with people who have those severely traumatized, severely kind of undermining neuronal pathways. And as I say, so for those of you watching this, you must be open if you're still watching. If you try this stuff, you'll find it works, and then you'll recommend it to someone else who's probably a lot more committed to feeling bad than you are. Again, unconsciously, no one is consciously, but, through feeling it's all they've ever known, it's the only thing that's real, whatever, justification is behind it. And you try and recommend they'll try this stuff, they won't try it. They'll find a reason not to. So, yeah, but you still offer, because sometimes they do try it and they become amazingly much more of a joy to be around. So definitely give it a try, but don't be like terribly disappointed and upset if they don't want to hear it.
We're going to take a quick break to share with you one of our amazing sponsors, Genetic Insights. What makes Genetic Insights uniquely valuable is that they test over 83 million different variants, which guarantees a 99.7% accuracy on all of their DNA reports. With over 100 reports available, you get comprehensive insights into what your DNA is telling you about how to optimize your health today and in the future. I found reviewing my results to be incredibly accurate and applying some of the recommendations, which are personalized to your individual DNA, to be extremely helpful for me and my family. I also loved how easy it was to upload my raw DNA data that I already had from previously using Ancestry.com, because Genetic Insights supports uploading raw data from all major platforms. To get your health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and get 20% off today by using coupon code Rejuvenate. Remember that supporting our sponsors supports our podcast, which allows us to keep sharing this important information with you free of cost. So, go get your Genetic Insights health reports by going to geneticinsights.co and use coupon code Rejuvenate for 20% off today. Yeah, so I do have a question in this space, because I loved how you described that the underlying of the neuronal pathway is the biochemical structure that holds it together. But if you follow potential the things that you're going to impart here, and that helps not rip away, but I guess establish new biochemistry internally, then that person won't necessarily fall back to the old pattern, correct? Because they will already have recreated new biochemistry within them.
Way less likely to. Yeah, I mean, some life events could still knock them back to the old pathway, right? You lose your job, someone very close to you dies, that kind of thing can still shake anyone. Who knows? It may shake me, right? I can't guarantee anything, but yeah, it at least makes you a hell of a lot more solid in that new pathway.
Beautiful. So where do you want to start with, Elwin?
Well, it's a good question. I was kind of debating which order we should do this in, and I decided in the end I'm going to do it in the order that I worked it out, so I can add a little bit of story element to it. So I'll just kind of continue from the last episode. So in the last episode, I said, once your energy gets higher, and I've seen this because I used to work with a lot of chronic fatigue people, that if you're that type who's like go, 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 then a lot of the time when you increase your energy, you just go, go, go again until you exhaust yourself again. And that's what I observed a lot. So when I started to get more energy again by following this approach, I was kind of mindful of that. And so I was aware that I wanted to keep my stress chemicals low. So I did various things to lower those, and I won't cover those because we did it already in the stress episode, right? So I was doing a lot of these things, but notice that the focus was on lowering the stress chemicals. So for instance, I would, take ashwagandha and phosphatidylserine, which have been shown to be very good at lowering cortisol. And that made sense given, my cortisol tend to be excessively high, right? So, okay, that made sense. Then I started thinking, okay, now I started getting into increasing dopamine. So, and again, I think what I said in one of the previous episodes about dopamine, I've changed my mind a little bit, and we'll talk about why. So I'm back of the opinion through experiential understanding as well as theory that dopamine is great. And I think the few things I said to cast aspersions on it last time actually apply to another neurochemical, which we're probably going to get to. So this is a bit of a misunderstanding. This goes on in the we talked about this in the last episode. There is no settled science pretty much in the realm of human biochemistry. Things, we're always kind of discovering new things. Things are always changing. Another example of this that's coming out recently is that it was kind of believed that a lot of the things that made men like unmanly when their testosterone started to get high, made them gain more weight and be more emotional and have less confidence and have less anxiety and all the rest of it, were down to high estrogen. And it's been discovered relatively recently, and it's still not mainstream. If you Google it, you'll still largely get estrogen. But it's become actually more clear that it's really prolactin is guilty of a lot of those negative side effects that people associate with lack of manliness in men as they get older. So that was like an example where, we thought it was one thing, and actually it turns out it's probably more going to be the other thing that's causing the problem. So I kind of had a similar thing with this. So let me talk about dopamine. Dopamine is the thing that gives you energy and motivation. They used to think of it as the reward chemical. It's not quite true. It is not the reward for doing something good. It is the desire to do something in the first place. So dopamine is the thing that makes you want to do something. I was concerned before about raising my dopamine anymore. And the concern was valid for one reason, which I will talk about, but it was not valid for other reasons. So I thought I had excess dopamine. I've got kind of a lot of the signs of it. So one of the things, if someone's dopamine is high, they will tend to be quick. And if it is not high, they will not. And I tend to be quick, too quick, as a lot of people point out.
Can you describe what your definition of quick means and in what circumstance? Give it context.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an extreme. So you might also be high dopamine, but not relate to this as much. But, an example is that people are like, oh, the year's gone so quickly. And I'm like, really? It feels like it's taken such a long time, right? So when you are quick, it feels like everything is really, really slow. You experience a lot of frustration because nothing is happening as quick as you want it to. So you're out of phase of the world. You're quick. Everything else is slow in comparison. If you think about like the superhero, the Flash, or Quicksilver or whatever, that's like an extreme example where they're moving around the world and it looks to them like the world has paused, right? But actually, if you look at it from everyone else's point of view, they're zipping around really, really quickly. So quickly that you can barely see them, right? So it's a way less extreme, but it's still a bit of a version of that, right? This happens in conversation as well. People talk slowly and I'm like, just get to the point, so,
Which is not just impatience. No, it could be high dopamine because I can pass that on to the family. I say, sorry, it's my high dopamine.
Well, I mean, these are not excuses for, bad behavior by me, you, or anyone else, but it is the reality of why you feel that way, right? And the people who have low dopamine, they're the opposite. They tend to go slowly. They feel like everything is going too quickly. They often feel overwhelmed. Life is going too quickly. The people around them are talking too quickly. Time goes too quickly, right? Where's the day gone? It's something that a low dopamine person would say, oh God, and for me, I'm like, God, the day took ages, right? If anything, if I'm not out of sync and not present, I'll go in that direction. Whereas someone else might be, oh my God, the day's gone so quickly, barely, right? And so that's like a speed thing with being in phase. So that's one thing. And of course, the reason why that relates to what I just said, so dopamine is the desire. And so obviously, if you want strongly something that has not happened yet, because by definition, well, one of the true spiritual secrets to happiness that I understand it is to want however it is right now, right? So however it is right now, want that, and then you'll always be happy. However, that is a level of enlightenment I have not achieved. So like most people who want a lot, I want stuff that's not here right now. Yeah. And so then there's that, time delay between wanting it and having it actually happen. And so, yeah, if you want strongly, then there's always that frustration. There's always that impatience. There's always that it's not happened yet, right? And so we talked about this before, type A personality, they used to call them, like people with high levels of motivation. There's good sides and bad sides to having that, as you can probably imagine. So I've tended to be that high dopamine person, or so I thought. But when I investigated it a bit more, I realized, you know what? I'm not sure if I'm actually truly high dopamine or whether it's actually more that I'm high in acetylcholine, which makes you think very quickly, and then also high in histamine. And histamine is fairly similar to dopamine, to go back to your point, Krissy, because it's a very valid one. But so they're both speeding up, fiery kind of, if you connect them to like the 4 or 5 elements, they're both fire, right? They're both speed. They're both like an intense, motivational, when you say fire, kind of sounds a bit wishy-washy, but it's like, you're fired up, right? That kind of say. And what happens when you have a lot of fire? You get fired up. What happens when you have too much fire? You end up burned out. So say it's still put into our language to kind of understand it. So, but the difference with a histamine type of fire is that it's more likely to be that burned out. It's more likely to be that agitated, irritated, frustrated, impatient, like stress type of fire. Whereas the dopamine is actually more likely to be peaceful, happy, just motivated, but not annoyed that things aren't going quick enough type of fire, right? So that's the distinction that I learned. The other thing that made me convinced about this is because I still had tendency to a little bit of addictive behaviors. Now, I know most of us do in these days, but, or compulsive is probably the better word than addictive, but, like checking social media too often, or playing games, or, just little things like that are relatively harmless compared to most addictions, but still just a sign of that kind of compulsiveness. Now, why has anyone got an addictive personality? Now, again, this is not settled science, but what I'm starting to understand is that it's actually always a lack of dopamine. And so what I noticed is as I started increasing my dopamine, my level of frustration and irritation and impatience actually went down, and yet I was still able to be just as quick. So I still have that perception of life goes pretty slowly. I definitely don't feel like life goes too quickly, like people with low dopamine would feel. But I'm not annoyed about it anymore. I'm just like, yeah, it's just the way it is.
That's good. It's
good. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you may have it down the line of telling us, how you were able to determine or measure these things, but I don't want to jump ahead in case that's coming.
We can get into that. So measuring dopamine. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it relates to what I was saying. Yeah, let me just finish on addiction. So anyone who has that addictive tendency could actually do with elevating their dopamine. That's my understanding. But here's the thing. The obvious kind of argument to that is, but Elwin, that's why they have an addiction. Like every piece of addictive behavior, whether it's an addictive drug or just an addictive behavior, whether it's porn, whether it's gambling, whether it's shopping, whether it's social media, whether it's gaming, whether it's workaholism, whatever it is a way of trying to increase dopamine because it is too low. And so the big challenge with dopamine is that your body super downregulates it. That's not a technical term. That's my embellished term for it. But it really downregulates it. It really doesn't want it to be too high. And there's a good reason for this because, as I just said, it's a fired up state. Dopamine is still a stress state. It's still... Dopamine's interesting. It's part of the sympathetic nervous system state, definitely, because when you're in a fight or flight situation, you need to be mentally sharp. You need to be highly motivated. But I would say the other stress chemicals don't belong in the ventral vagal state, whereas dopamine still does. So when you're in that relaxed but engaged and still mentally sharp and still motivated mode that the ventral vagal system recommends, the ultimate state really, where does that energy and still being sharp and being engaged and all the rest come from? It comes from, first of all, basic cellular energy, but it also comes from dopamine. But it comes without the agitation and stress and worry that's more related to norepinephrine and histamine and cortisol and other chemicals, right? So in terms of the testing, that's one non-lab test is, do I have any compulsive addictive tendencies? Again, we almost all do because of technology these days has kind of programmed us to have it. But the greater the degree that you have it, and of course, if it's a full-blown severe addiction that you need help with, then that's a greater degree than if it's just minor. And they say about an addiction or a compulsion, from a spiritual point of view, any addiction and compulsion is bad because it takes you away from the present moment. But from a practical, kind of more medical point of view, an addiction becomes a problem only if it affects your quality of life, right? If it gets in the way of work, if it gets in the way of relationships, if it gets in the way of sleep, if it gets in the way of looking after yourself, if it gets in the way of those basic functions, which often it does, you know. If you see all these, and again, I'm not judging, but parents who are like on their phone while their child is desperately wanting their attention, you know, or on their phone when they're supposed to be working or when they're supposed to be driving, or you know what I mean? Like all of these things, it gets in the way of most people's lives, I would say, these addictions. But again, it's all about degrees, right? The more that it gets in the way of your quality of life, the worse it is. And I would say the more severe the dopamine deficiency is. So I'd say that's the best possible test. How easy is it for you to be present? How easy is it for you to drop at will anything of these kind of things, usually in the addictive category? Now, in terms of lab tests, we were just discussing this the other day, Krissy. I don't know about the validity of saliva and urine tests, especially urine tests, because they're showing what your body's excreting, not what your body's got in it. And so that can often be completely misleading. I know that in case of serotonin, my understanding is it's misleading. I haven't investigated dopamine yet, so I'm not sure. But the much more commonly available lab test, which I think is a good marker, is prolactin, which I talked about earlier. And so prolactin, and my prolactin was really high repeatedly. And this was one of the reasons why I had high testosterone, like over the scale testosterone. And yet I wasn't acting like a super high testosterone guy because I also had over the scale prolactin. So they kind of canceled each other out a little bit. And so if you ask any doctor, how do I lower my prolactin, or if you ask them to give you something to lower the prolactin, what they will do is give you a dopamine agonist, so something that increases dopamine. They are directly antithetical to each other. So basically, it is possible to have very high testosterone and very high prolactin. It's not possible to have very high dopamine and very high prolactin. You're gonna have one or the other. And so as a result of that, I thought, you know what, even though I feel like I'm a high dopamine person, and generally if I do the self-testing, I'm described as one, I have high prolactin, I still have this compulsive behavior, I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to increase my dopamine. And sure enough, I felt way better as a result. The compulsive behavior went down. Actually, the agitation and stuff, which I had previously associated to dopamine, because it's that fired up state, also went down. Now, with a caveat, which it needed something else, which we'll get into next. But for a little while, it felt really, really great. And so, yeah, I would say raising dopamine is something that almost everyone needs to do. But the problem is almost everything that raises dopamine only does it temporarily, and it actually lowers your dopamine even more afterwards. And that's true not just of substances, but it's even true of behaviors, you know? So exercise will raise dopamine, but it actually lowers it. Cold water will raise dopamine, and eventually it will actually lower it. Being successful at work will raise it, but then it will actually lower it. So what we need to do is not raise dopamine so much as raise the baseline of it. Now, as I said, if you go to a doctor and say, I've got high prolactin, they'll give you bromocriptine or something like that. That's just a dopamine agonist. It's not that different from amphetamine or Ritalin, which Ritalin is just a form of amphetamine. It's not, basically, it's just, it's an agonist. So agonist means like an activator, like pushing the yes or on button. It raises it and it keeps it high for quite a while. So if you take like cocaine or something, it will go up and it will go right back down again after less than an hour. But if you take like methamphetamine, you'll be riding high for quite a while with the dopamine. And if you take amphetamine every day, you'll have your dopamine consistently high. The problem is getting off it, right?
Yeah,
because then
absolutely. Yeah, it's not recommended.
Well, that's one of the problem. The other problem is that riding high on dopamine, well, the problem, with amphetamines or pseudoamphetamine or any of these is that they don't just raise dopamine, they also raise norepinephrine, they raise cortisol, they raise all the other stress chemicals, they suppress the calming neurotransmitters, which we'll get into. And so they basically keep you in this using up energy in a rapid state space. And yeah, people will deplete themselves, and this is why if you take meth for a year, you look like hollowed out, right? Because it's literally sucked all the vitality and the nutrition out of you at a rapidly accelerated pace. So we don't want to do that. So we don't want to do that. We want to raise the baseline. So the recommendations I'm going to make are for that.
And can you talk about what that means to raise the baseline?
Yes. So as I said, raising it temporarily, let's just make numbers up, right? Let's say at 10, you feel on top of the world, too high. 0, you feel like flat, you don't want to get out of bed. So if you're in a 5 and then you take coffee, depending on how addicted depending on how adapted you are to it, maybe it'll raise you up to a 6 or a 7, right? You take amphetamine, it might, raise you up to a 9 or a 10, something like that, right? The problem is afterwards, it might go down to a 4.5. So then you're even lower than you were before. And then you've got to take it again. And this time, the amphetamine will get you to an 8 and 8.5 rather than a 9 or a 10. And then once it's worn off that time, you end up as a 4. I mean, this is like a more rapid progression in reality. But your baseline keeps going lower because your body's trying to down-regulate. Basically, your body produces less of its own dopamine because it's like, oh, we're already flooded with it, let's produce less. And the receptors, it might atrophy some receptors, so it will make less receptors, and it will make the receptors more resistant. Like you've heard of insulin resistance, it's the same idea. Like the dopamine won't activate the receptor as much. So it does all that. And so all of those actions are what I mean when I say reduce the baseline. So what we actually want to do is the opposite. Yes, we want to increase the dopamine in circulation, but more importantly, we want to increase the amount of dopamine receptors, and we want to increase the sensitivity of those receptors so that we can actually, experience that not too high, but high dopamine state on an ongoing basis throughout the day. But of course, still be able to sleep at night. That's one of the other issues with the meth, and I think why it holds you out. And to be honest, to some degree, it's true of coffee and every other stimulant as well, is it stops you sleeping and it stops you resting. So yeah, that's another of the challenge with it.
Okay. And so then how would somebody raise their baseline of dopamine?
Good question. So now we're in the Elwin experiments phase, but just for you to know, first of all, that's the goal. That's what you really want to do. So don't just be looking up things that raise dopamine. Almost everything that raises dopamine does it temporarily, and then it goes lower than it was before, slightly, right? And then if you keep taking it, it will keep getting lower, and you'll be utterly, and this is why you become addicted, because you feel, with all drugs, you start off taking them because you want to feel good, you end up taking them because you don't want to feel bad. That's the universal thing of all addictive drugs. That's what they all have in common. So we don't want to get into that cycle. So after all that preamble, the actual recommendations I'll make for dopamine are quite simple. So first of all, are you maybe simply missing the building blocks to produce enough dopamine? I am quite surprised how often that does actually appear to be the case. So what do I mean by building blocks? So everything in your body is made out of something. It's made out of nutrients, right? Simplistic way of saying it would be that it's made out of food. So dopamine especially is made out of the amino acid phenylalanine, which makes tyrosine. So I often say that it's made out of tyrosine because it's more of a direct connection. So L-tyrosine is a non-essential amino acid. It's non-essential because you can make it out of phenylalanine. And so tyrosine is a very interesting amino acid. Generally, if you have a low protein diet, you may well not have an optimal amount of tyrosine. If you have plenty of protein in your diet, but you struggle to digest protein because your stomach is not working optimally, then especially not producing enough acid to break the protein down into individual amino acids for your body to absorb, then you may not have enough tyrosine. Another issue of tyrosine is it has a few different purposes, all of which seem to revolve around energy, funnily enough. So for those of you who are really paying attention, you'll remember we talked about tyrosine already because it is the basic building block also of thyroxine, which is thyroid hormone, which is what you need to have a fast metabolism and cellular energy. It's also the basic building block of melanin, which is the color pigment for your skin and your hair. It relates to something called the alpha melanocyte system, which is not fully understood yet, but it relates to tanning, it relates to energy, it relates to sex drive, and it relates to reducing inflammation. It relates to a few kind of disparate things that are not fully understood. But anyway, tyrosine is a building block of melanin. And so if you're producing more melanin for whatever reason, that's going to use up the tyrosine. If you're struggling to produce enough thyroxine, thyroid hormone, that's going to use up the tyrosine. And then tyrosine is used to make dopamine, but from dopamine, dopamine is then also turned into norepinephrine or noradrenaline, which is in some context beneficial, but overall not as beneficial to have high for very long. So norepinephrine is anti-inflammatory. That's why they give it as an injection if you've had a allergic reaction. And it has some other benefits as well. But generally, it makes you feel jittery. So the feeling of if you have pure norepinephrine, you're like, oh, so that's not how you want to be most of the time, right? If you're used to feeling depressed, it can feel like an upgrade. That's one of the problems. Like that jittery kind of thing that you get with coffee, I kind of associate with it. With all the drugs I mentioned, amphetamines and all the rest of it, they all increase norepinephrine as well. One of the challenges, in fact, is when it comes to when we're selecting things, substances to increase dopamine, is how to increase dopamine without increasing norepinephrine too much, given that the body makes norepinephrine out of dopamine. And then in turn, it makes pure actual adrenaline or epinephrine out of norepinephrine. So, as I said, one of the challenges is how do we get it to make dopamine, but not the other stuff? But we'll get into that for a minute. To begin with, if you're low in energy in general, if you're not, if you're low in epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine, if you're just generally low in energy, you may, or low in like mental clarity, that's another common sign of being low in dopamine, then L-tyrosine may well be beneficial for you. This is also something that you can test. When I did tests for amino acids, it turned out that my L-tyrosine was low. So this is one of the other things that made me feel confident to try some, because at least I could see, well, I don't have an excess because my body is basically excreting none. So it would appear to have a deficiency. And then I checked blood, it wasn't high in the blood. So, okay, so it's not holding on to a lot, it's just low. That's generally the best way of seeing with these things is, if you're not excreting a lot and it's low in the blood, then that's an indication, okay, I just don't have enough. So tyrosine is the basic building block of dopamine. There are various nutrients as well which are called cofactors, which are involved in that transformation from L-tyrosine, which is an amino acid, to dopamine, which is this wonderful neurochemical which makes you feel motivated and mentally clear and joyful and all the rest of it. And so the ones that I tend to focus on that I feel are most important to make sure you get enough of, I won't mention every one of them because some of them no one has an issue with, but are the B vitamins, which I always talk about, my favorite vitamins. Really all of them again, although as usual, B1 is very important. B3 also really, really important. But getting like a B complex, I generally think is one of those supplements that really is just worth doing. Again, in an ideal world, if we were living in an ideal way and in alignment with nature and all the rest of it, we would not be stressed, we would not be whatever, and we would be using up a conservative amount of B vitamins. But If you are in a modern fast-paced world and a modern fast-paced life, you kind of need more B vitamins. It's pretty high in yeast. So if you really want to go the food route and you don't have a yeast allergy or intolerance, like yeast extract, some people like taking that. That's a more natural food form. There are other food forms that are really high, like liver, but I'm not keen on that anymore for reasons I'll talk about in an episode or two. So I'm really a fan of supplementing that. And then there's also iron. Iron is especially an issue for women, that they tend to become depleted in it. Generally not for men. With iron, it's often not that it's lacking in the diet. It's that just because women menstruate, that they lose a lot of iron every month. So that's the big reason why, especially women, often do better with supplementing iron. Or, as I said before, I think iron is one of the least easily supplemented nutrients. So if you can get it from food, it is better. And generally, that's pretty tough to do if you want to be vegan without supplementing. But if you're willing to have meat or fish, then you can usually do it quite easily, get enough. However, sometimes it's a cofactor issue of iron if people are like chronically low in iron. However, I will say too much iron is just as much of a problem as too little. So don't go crazy with the iron. It's oxidative. It feeds bad bacteria and bad pathogenic organisms inside you. It prematurely ages you. There's a lot of research around it if you have excessive amounts. So you just want to have the right amount of iron. But anyway, lack of iron can be an issue. Lack of zinc can be an issue. This is more of an issue for men. And again, if you don't want to eat any animal foods, then you kind of need to supplement to get an optimal amount. So if you are eating meat regularly, especially, animal flesh type meat, then you are unlikely to have any issue with zinc. I personally do not, so I supplement. Magnesium is a cofactor for pretty much everything, and definitely for this transformation as well. And again, it's something that tends to be low in a lot of people for all the reasons I think I've talked about before. I won't go through it all again, but yeah, I recommend supplementing with magnesium as well, because it's kind of hard to get enough from food, again, with the way that we live our lives, right? If we were living a peaceful agrarian existence like the vast majority of our recent ancestors, or a peaceful hunter-gatherer existence as the vast majority of our distant ancestors, then we might not need it. But we live the kind of lives we do that's completely unnatural and completely fast-paced and completely crazy. So we need more magnesium. So those are the cofactors that I specifically recommend that you focus on. Now, obviously, that's a generalization. Ideally, you get yourself a good broad spectrum test to see where you're at with all of the nutrients, see if there's any key nutrients that you're missing, because any key nutrients that you're missing can be an issue. But that's the building blocks. And so that's the easiest way to raise the baseline if it applies to you, because otherwise it's tricky, as we talked about. And I'm going to give a couple of recommendations which may help, but ideally that is the issue. And in fact, in a lot of people is the issue for reasons we talked about in the previous episodes. I won't go through it again, but a lot of people are low in at least some of these essential nutrients. So if you get enough of these essential nutrients, either from food or diet, then your body has every building block that it needs to make the dopamine, and then it can have an optimal amount. What I find crazy is when people say, oh yeah, well, I take my coffee in the morning, but with tyrosine, I'm really careful because, I find it very stimulating. And I'm like, tyrosine is genuinely stimulating. This is the thing. A lot of people wouldn't say that. A lot of people say it's less stimulating than coffee. But my point is, if you're already having a coffee every morning and then you add some tyrosine on top, you will feel it a bit, especially if you're aware of your body. But that's because you're giving more building block for more stress chemicals that the coffee is indirectly causing by lowering the level of adenosine, which is a calming neurotransmitter. So if you lower the level of a calming neurotransmitter, you de facto allow other stress chemicals to raise because they haven't got something calming them down. And then if you give them a building block to make more stress chemicals, then it's even easier for your body to make excessive stress chemicals.
And the goal is not to make the stress chemical.
Absolutely. As we talked about in the last episode, the goal is to be running on metabolic energy, not stress energy. And they're refining that a little bit and saying, okay, technically we want to make one of the stress chemicals because it's what gives you motivation and drive and clarity and gives that, what's the word, like that life force energy, I want to do something thing, not just the peaceful Zen thing. But you don't want the other stress chemicals in excessive amounts. You want them. I mean, we talked about this. You can have too little cortisol eventually because you've burned yourself out. That can be a problem as well. Everything is about balance, but generally we want to keep, especially in norepinephrine and epinephrine, low. Sometimes we want to raise cortisol, but we almost always want to keep norepinephrine lower than it is on an ongoing basis. Having a spike once or twice a day when you exercise or do cold water, that's fine. But I'm saying as a general principle, not just fine, it can be good, but as a general principle, you want that norepinephrine to not be too high. But we do want that dopamine to be higher.
So how are you currently raising your level of dopamine without raising the other stress chemicals?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, I want to confirm, I feel like I am doing it, both based on how I feel, but also lab tests. I got my prolactin level lower than I've seen it ever since I've been testing it. So that's a good indicator that it is actually working, as well as how I feel and changing my behavior and whatnot. So far, to answer that question I asked, like what is the best way of doing it? The best answer I've come up with is a substance called Bromantane. So Bromantane is very interesting. It was developed, I think, in Russia. So like the whole Russian system, as we talked about in the peptides episode, they've kind of went in a very different direction than we did, with a possibly not as much profit motivated agenda. So Bromantane is classed as a nootropic or a stimulant, understandably, because it increases your energy, but it works in a very different way to most other, well, from what I can see, almost all other things that raise dopamine. So most things that raise dopamine, you take it, your dopamine goes up, you don't carry on taking it, your dopamine goes down, often crashes down, often lower than it was before. Bromantane, you take it, nothing much happens. You take it again the next day, your dopamine is a little bit higher all day. You take it the next day, your dopamine is a little bit higher all day. And so it's something that doesn't seem to work as a stimulant where you have a peak and a crash. It's something that gradually over time increases that baseline of dopamine. Now, if you look it up, some people say like it's not understood how it happens. Some people do talk about a mechanism. One of the things it seems to be is a reuptake inhibitor, same as what they say about SSRIs. It just stops your body from breaking it down. Now, again, this can be tricky because, of course, your body could still down-regulate. If that's the case, it might just go, oh, there's more in circulation. Oh, that will reduce the receptors and all the rest of it, like I said earlier. But for some reason, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I think that's why it's in that category of we don't really understand how it works. Because it seems like even long-term, it will just increase the levels of circulating dopamine without that side effect of down-regulation, without that side effect of the baseline going down. And to me, most importantly, without the side effect of having the peak and the crash. Because that's the problem with any dopamine substance I've taken my whole life, right? Is the crash, right? The come up is great. The come down is not so good, right? As we talk about people who used to party.
Yeah.
But this just stays consistently high. So bromantane is one of a family of compounds. I think adamantane was the original one. And so, it's the one of that I think that is these days the most popular, the most studied. And so that's really interesting. Now, there's another one which is a little bit more on the path to being more of an actual stimulant called 9-MeBC, another nootropic. This has a different mechanism of action. It is a bit more, it gives you energy, but it doesn't have the crash, but it doesn't keep building. like the Bromantane does, if that makes sense. So the thing that I find interesting about it is one of the mechanisms of action that it has is that it resensitizes the dopamine receptors, which have become desensitized by stimulant abuse. And the research I saw was specifically around coffee. So someone who keeps, drinking a lot of caffeine, using a lot of caffeine, the dopamine the dopamine receptors gradually get less stimulatable. They become more resistant, and so the 9-MeBC will actually reverse that damage and make the dopamine receptors more receptive again. So that's really interesting as well. I have not had as much experience with the 9-MeBC yet. I'm more cautious of that because it is a bit more actually stimulant-like to me, which I'm always very, very wary of. But again, if I were to choose between having 9-MeBC or chocolate, coffee, tea, any of those kind of things, I'd far rather have the 9-MeBC because it has a much more interesting and helpful and healing kind of mechanism of action as far as I can see. It's not just blocking your calming neurochemicals and artificially raising your stress chemicals as all the other more common stimulants do, but I'd still class it more as a stimulant, so I'm a little bit more careful of it. But yeah, so those are the things that, again, don't do it just because I said so, but that I would want to research if you feel like you need a stimulant to get through the day. Now, the other thing that I think is particularly interesting about dopamine is this whole area of depression. So what we've done up until very recently to treat depression for a good 40-ish years now is to mainly work by increasing serotonin. And this is ineffective, might be pushing it, but risky for one. The drugs that raise serotonin show significant side effect profile, the risk of suicide, risk of all kinds of fairly severe issues. Certainly, sexual lack of libido, all those kind of issues. The best case scenario of SSRIs that I have seen generally is, you know what, I'm no longer unhappy, but I just feel emotionally flat and my sex drive is gone. That's generally what you see from people, unless you take a cocktail of other drugs, right? Unless you then take Viagra to increase your sex drive, and you then take, a bunch of stimulants to get your dopamine going again. But so SSRIs, I'm not loving those for depression. One of the only common antidepressant drugs that is currently prescribed that is not in boosting serotonin is Wellbutrin, and Wellbutrin raises dopamine instead of serotonin. And the people who I speak to who are on Wellbutrin, they much prefer it, the vast majority, over SSRIs. I honestly don't know why they still do SSRIs, and I think they are going out of favor. I can see, but obviously I can see why someone could pick an SSRI, a doctor, over Wellbutrin, because the Wellbutrin is basically kind of still a stimulant. It still has that issue of being a dopamine agonist, and so over time you're going to have down regulation of dopamine. But in terms of like what works, what makes a person not depressed, it's dopamine all the way. Like, what is depression? The most severe, I'm worthless, everything's worthless. But it's kind of, isn't it like a feeling of gravity? Like I can't, everything is futile, everything's pointless, everything's too difficult. I can't get out of bed, I can't get out of the house, I can't do this, I don't want to do this. What's the point? Everything's futile, right? All of those kind of sentiments and feelings are really anti-dopamine, right? Because dopamine is, I want to do this, I want to do that. As I said, the problem with high dopamine people, maybe they're not being impatient and frustrated, genuinely high dopamine people, but they're certainly not like, what's the point, right? It's like, there's so much I want to achieve. That's the dopamine perspective, right? There's so much I want to do. There's so much to live for. That's the dopamine perspective. So I feel like these things like Bromantane and 9-MeBC, and my experience with people who I've tried this with who identified as depressed, is They were not clinically depressed, so I can't claim any experience of that. But the average depressed, which, maybe 20 to 30% of the population is that it's extremely effective.
Wonderful. Is there a relationship or a correlation, or does serotonin at all or any way affect the amount or the levels of dopamine that one has in the body?
There is a correlation, but it's not antithetical like with prolactin dopamine or something like that. You can have high dopamine and serotonin, you can have low dopamine and serotonin, you can have high one, not one. Some substances will absolutely raise both. Some will reduce both, some will raise one, not the other. So yeah, there's not that clear connective correlation, no.
Okay.
They tend to come together a bit though, because, and this is something that, again, not always, but more often than average, they tend to come together. And my understanding of why that is because I've been really rethinking my understanding of serotonin. And I'm not the only one. As we've talked about, the mainstream medical establishment very recently, in the case of these SSRIs, is starting to question, is depression actually anything to do with low serotonin? Maybe we've fundamentally misunderstood what serotonin actually is and what it's about. I'm starting to become more convinced, I'm not 100% there yet, that serotonin is actually a stress chemical. Even though, yes, it gets turned into melatonin, which is definitely a sleep-promoting agent. Serotonin is stimulated by sunlight. Cortisol is also, especially sunlight in the eyes rather than on the skin, so light. Cortisol is also stimulated by sunlight, right? Which is another stress chemical. So, this is complex. I don't know if we want to get into this yet, or if we want to get into my let me go into my other thing first. Then we'll finish on serotonin.
Okay.
So the other thing is, so back to my story. So I was raising my dopamine. I was feeling fantastic, and then after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm getting a bit edgy. I'm still getting a bit agitated. I'm still getting a bit not sleeping well. I'm feeling a bit stressed, basically. Not anxious, but stressed. So I'm like, something's missing here. And I'm like, I'm already lowering cortisol with these things. I'm already lowering norepinephrine. What is it? What am I missing? And then it was while studying hormones that I realized what I was missing, purely accidentally while experimenting with something. So I took something which is a very strong GABA agonist. In fact, one of the strongest, or the strongest, this is a matter of opinion a little bit, endogenous, meaning naturally created in the body, GABA agonists. And I felt so good. I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been missing. Not just relaxing, happy, joyful. I noticed so I said earlier that dopamine is kind of fire. I really relate GABA with earth. And earth in the sense of being relaxed, being connected with earth, but also earth in the kind of metaphorical language of the past was also related to the physical body, the senses. So suddenly everything, all the sensory experience would be so much more enjoyable. The smoothness of touching something or just being in my body became so much more pleasurable. Another thing that became more pleasurable is movement. So exercise and movement and just, again, being in my body, and also music, and especially rhythm. I said this to you before, Krissy, I barely listen to music. Since I've been increasing my GABA, I'm really enjoying music again and just having fun. And then looking into GABA, I was like, people love GABA. And the number one thing that people take all the time, which massively raises GABA, but not maybe in a great way?
Alcohol?
Absolutely. So alcohol has two mechanisms of action, I would say, primarily. First of all, is that it's a poison that the body has to... First of all, it converts into aldehyde, and then that can lead to kind of the not feeling great the next day, the hangover. But the other thing that they associate with the hangover the next day is that the GABA is still so high, that it's excessively high, and that's the wooziness, right? So that's in excess of it. But if we think about why do people... I don't drink. When you go out with people who drink, how do they try and convince you to drink? go on, just have a drink. Why? Just, just have fun. Just relax. Just loosen your inhibitions. Just, take it easy. Like, this is the kind of thing that they say, right? Stop taking life so seriously. Let's just have fun. Let's just lay back. Let's just relax. So those are all GABA kind of phrases, right? And so the wonderful thing about GABA, I found, is it's just that perfect complement to dopamine. I've tried having both of them without the other. If you have high dopamine but no GABA, yes, you're motivated. Yes, you're fired up. Yes, you could even say joyful. But what you are not is easygoing. And what you're also not doing, you're not stopping to smell the roses. You're often focused on the future rather than the present, what you want to achieve. And so, yeah, that's where the agitation, and you find it hard to switch off and relax and have fun and enjoy and go to sleep as well, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of that with people like, oh, if I could fall asleep, but I can't stay asleep. My mind's just so active. Or sometimes people like, I can't even fall asleep. Yeah, they're just like, it's on constantly.
Absolutely. And then I tried having high GABA with low dopamine. I'll tell you, I was relaxed. I was easygoing. I did not want to do anything. I slept a lot. I didn't want to get out of bed, but not in a depressed way, in a more, I'm enjoying this so much kind of way. So you don't really want to achieve anything. You don't want to do anything when you're really high GABA. Not really high. Really high, anything is bad. But when you're, good level of high GABA. When you have both together, you have that motivation, the drive, the joy of doing something, but you also have that ability to be present, that ability to calm down, that easygoingness, the relaxed, the joviality, the not taking yourself too seriously. And so that kind of balance I have really, really enjoyed. And I said I first discovered this when I was looking at hormones. And so what I found that was of great interest is that, you remember you asked, do serotonin and dopamine go together? I actually was surprised how often GABA and dopamine go together, even though they seem polar opposite. And just to go back to my previous point, what I realized is I was trying to get myself to a good place by reducing the stress chemicals, right? Lowering cortisol, norepinephrine. I was going at it the wrong angle. Rather than reducing stress chemicals, I actually should have been focusing on increasing GABA. Now, also increasing glycine. Glycine is an amino acid, which is very abundant in some foods, but it is actually also a neurochemical in its own right. And so GABA can be made out of glycine, but glycine is also has similar calming effects. And so when I say GABA from now on, I'm going to include glycine in there, but they both have such similar function that I'll lump them together. So what I discovered is, back to hormones, what I discovered is that the hormones that make you feel the best, the hormones associated with youth, the sex hormones I'm talking about now, sorry. The sex hormones that make you feel the best, the sex hormones associated with youth and vitality and, what we lose when we start to get old, they have a powerful effect on both dopamine and GABA. And often they actually have a restrictive effect on cortisol, on norepinephrine, and even on serotonin. So they're actually lowering some of these other things while they're raising the dopamine and GABA. Now, the serotonin one's the most gray area, but so they're basically lowering the stress chemicals while increasing the levels of dopamine and GABA together. And so what I discovered is both sexes can benefit from both, but generally the hormone that's understood to be the most beneficial for men is, Krissy?
Testosterone.
And for women?
Estrogen.
Incorrect.
Ooh.
Progesterone.
Progesterone. Yeah, it was one or the other.
So estrogen is a tricky one. Estrogen is another one that, again, I'm not like 100% settled on this, but that was the old thinking that estrogen was the problem. With menopause and with PMT, they would give estrogen, did not get very good results with that. So if you go to an anti-aging clinic that focuses on sex hormones for men, they will give you testosterone primarily. If you go for women, they'll give you progesterone primarily. They often give women a little bit of testosterone as well. They usually don't give estrogen. Estrogen is a pro-growth chemical. It leads to feminine traits. It leads to sexual receptiveness in both men and women. It's necessary for sex in both of them. And it's a pro-growth hormone, of course. It helps you to grow a baby. But it's also implicated in all kinds of other unwanted growth. The C word growths, and also putting on fat weight, right? The worst kind of weight. So estrogen is generally not the thing that makes you feel good. And estrogen is associated with stress chemicals way more than you might think. So for men, it's testosterone. For women, it's progesterone. Now, here's the bit that was really interesting. For me, I did not take either of those things. What I took first is something called allopregnanolone. Now, allopregnanolone is something that your body, and it's men and women, although women more, makes out of progesterone. So it's a down. So your body starts off with cholesterol. It turns that into something called pregnenolone, which is called the master hormone or sex hormone. Then there's a bunch of intermediaries, and then it converts some of it into progesterone, some of it into cortisol, and then some of it into DHEA. And then out of the DHEA, it makes testosterone and or estrogen, and it can go back and forth between those two. So that's kind of what's fairly known, probably not by the average person, but certainly, your medical doctor, your alternative medicine practitioner, your YouTube health person, like me. But what's not often known is that actually I'm starting to believe that taking the mid-level metabolites of the sex hormones is not the best strategy, and yet it's what everyone does. So meaning progesterone does have a lot of benefits, documented benefits, like so many, for making you feel young, for anti-aging, for reducing stress. It absolutely does. But what I'm starting to wonder is how many of those benefits are down to progesterone, and how many of those benefits are down to allopregnanolone, which, despite the confusing name, is basically like a form of progesterone. It's like a downstream form of progesterone. Because when you look at the benefits of allopregnanolone, it is very, very impressive. So it's the strongest, or one of the strongest, naturally made in the body hormones for stimulating GABA. It also stimulates dopamine, but not as much. Definitely not as much. Another thing, which I'll talk about in a minute, stimulates dopamine really strongly. Now here's the interesting thing to me, because with the dopamine, we talked about taking the building blocks. I personally find 1 milligram of allopregnanolone is way more powerful than 500 milligrams of GABA, the actual thing. Even liposomally. Liposomally means it should be absorbed through your mucous membrane straight into your bloodstream. Still, there's something about allopregnanolone that just hits that GABA receptor and just... I've never taken Valium or Xanax, but I imagine it's how those things feel. And it's awesome. Now, the danger, of course, is, does it downregulate as of all these things, right? This is the tricky thing. There are, again, this is still in the Elwin experiments phase, but there are two things that suggest to me that it doesn't. First of all, practical experience, and then second of all, the research. So my practical experience is... these days, I only take it at night. One of the other things that's helped me do is sleep earlier than I've ever been able to do, because I've always been an extremely late sleeper, as you know, Krissy.
Oh my God, hallelujah.
And since using it at any time, I've been going to sleep like 3 or 4 hours earlier and waking up about 3 or 4 hours earlier. So that's huge for me. That makes a massive difference. And it shows me how all along it was just that my mind wasn't calming down, because that's exactly what GABA does. GABA really reduces the activity in that prefrontal cortex where the thinking happens, and just allows you to calm down. It's funny because they call a GABA an inhibitory neurochemical because it reduces activity.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you talk a little bit about what GABA does?
Yeah. So, I talked about it colloquially, but yeah, so like biochemically, it calms everything down. It reduces the activity in general of the whole central nervous system. But as I said, it especially reduces the activity of the thinking executive part of the brains that are focused on what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what I want, what I don't want. Like all of that energy expensive thinking just doesn't go away, but just calms down. There's less of a focus on that, less of an activity in that area, which is, so it's funny, it's called an inhibitory neurotransmitter, but it actually reduces inhibitions. So you could say it's like the opposite in a way, right? Because it stops you being, oh, I shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that. Oh, okay, whatever, right? Just relax, just take it easy. So yeah, it basically works by calming everything down, especially calming down that executive functions of the brain, the part of us that's thinking, the conscious mind, right? So that's what it does in a nutshell. By calming everything down, so it's going to reduce the stress. It's going to reduce the amount of energy utilized, which allows then rest to happen, allows regeneration, recuperation, rejuvenation, the immune system to work better, the detoxification system to work better, the digestive system to work better. All the systems that are put kind of on temporary hold while you're in a stress state can come back online and become primary. Also helps the sexual reproductive system to become, more strongly expressed. So yeah, GABA is a good thing, not in excess, as we talked about, but this is why I really feel like the balance between dopamine and GABA is really where it's at. And so I feel like it kind of simplified things, because I know the hormone episode, I made things quite complicated. There's all these different glands and all these different things they produce. So once you start getting your metabolism going, your cellular energy up, it's possible that all you really need to do is just balance those two forces, maybe like a yin and yang. So it's like, are you lacking motivation to get stuff done, or lacking energy, or lacking clarity? Up your dopamine a bit. Are you starting to take things too seriously? Are you starting to get too uptight? Are you starting to get stressed? Are you starting to get anxious? Are you starting to get worried? Up you go GABA a bit, and just like find the right level. And as I say, better to up that in general rather than in the day, right? So nothing I've recommended other than maybe the 9-MeBC so far is something to take to feel better now. It's all long term, right? And so I'll give the same recommendations for the GABA as well. So I said 2 bits of evidence. The other bit of evidence is that, interestingly, allopregnanolone is actually an FDA-registered drug. Even though it is an endogenous hormone that exists inside you and me right now, it is also an FDA-registered drug. What they do is they've actually licensed it for use in women who have postpartum depression. And so what they do in that case is they give you a massive dose, I think it's 150 milligrams, over the course of, I believe it's 3 days, IV. They just give you like a constant drip of it. And it has to be done under medical supervision, because if you give a person that much allopregnanolone, it will stimulate that much GABA that they could pass out and crack their head open, right. Could slow their heart rate too much. So because it's such a massive dose, they've got to be a bit careful with it. That treatment costs, have a guess, Krissy, or did I tell you this already?
No, you haven't, but I'm going to say it's going to be way up there.
Over $30,000 last time I checked for that 3-day treatment. So yeah, not recommending that for anyone unless you happen to be in that position and your doctor's recommended it. Of course, then go for it. But here's the interesting thing about that to me. If a person was like really low in motivation energy, would you put them on a massive dose of methamphetamine for 3 days and then send them off on their way?
No.
No, because the downregulation would be epic, right? They would be like, have such a come down from it. If a person was like in chronic pain, would you give them a massive dose of opiates for 3 days and then send them on their way? No, because of the massive downregulation, the person would be in even more pain than before. With the allopregnanolone, you can give them a massive dose and send them on their way, and they just feel better. That's what the research shows, and they rarely need to do it again. So that tells me it doesn't downregulate, it just tops up. Right. It just gets your body to produce a bunch more GABA. Then you're in that position of producing more GABA. You got this excess now of allopregnanolone, whereas before you probably got a deficit. I'm guessing that the reason it's particularly effective in women with postpartum depression is because generally after pregnancy, everything's been depleted, probably including allopregnanolone, including GABA. Your progesterone is really high when you're pregnant, and then it really nosedives after you've had the baby. So the progesterone goes way down, the allopregnanolone goes way down. So it just tops you back up again, and then you're good. So that tells me it's not a thing that downregulates, like Xanax, like Valium, like alcohol, like all of these other things that temporarily raise GABA. And so that's the other thing that tells me that this is way safer than alcohol or cannabis or Xanax or all these other things that people are recreationally using.
Yeah, because I was gonna. Sorry to interrupt. I was gonna ask you because it seems like it is on the I don't know if it is, and you can correct me, but if it's like on that if it's classed as a steroid, because when you use steroids or when steroids are prescribed or used, you have to be very careful with that. But from what you're saying, it's just it doesn't have that particular side effect.
I think the honest answer is not enough research has been done. I think possibly the reason they're selling it this way is because it's a way they can make money out of it. I don't know why they don't just sell it as a thing that they give you every day. I think it may well be because you get to a point where you're topped up and you don't need it anymore, and that's the last thing that they want. So it's like, how do we make money out of something that after a while people don't need it anymore? I'll tell you what, give it to them all at once and charge them $36,000. That's a good way of doing it. Oh, all right. But do we let everyone have it? Hell no. It's going to interfere with the sales of SSRIs and all kinds of other things. All right, well, just give it to postpartum women. Okay, good idea. All right, yeah. I'm joking a bit.
No,
but I think it's something like, I'm sure the people involved are more sincere than that, but someone somewhere is making some kind of decision, like in the admin and the accounting, marketing department, something like that about it. So it is a steroid, as are all of the sex and adrenal, hormones technically, yeah. But I would say it's safe for the reasons I just said. But I don't know for sure, and there's not enough research. So do I think it's better than Xanax if you're really taking that? Yes. Then alcohol if you're really taking that? Yes. Then cannabis if you're really taking that? Yes. Then nothing if you're not taking anything? Maybe not, right? But maybe, because the benefit of increasing that GABA might be more beneficial than whatever risks are involved. That is something that you have to decide for yourself and carefully work out for yourself. Discuss with your physician if you have one that's open-minded. So I was looking to this and I tried this. I'm like, well, this is fantastic. But you know what? This is like a female hormone. Now, men have some progesterone, women have some testosterone. I just said women are routinely prescribed testosterone, along with progesterone when they get older, when they want to optimize. So this is not a big deal, but I was still wondering, what's the male equivalent of this? So this is obviously a thing that I study anyway. One of my roles is doing research for a brand that is specifically for men, but obviously it's relevant to me as well as a man. So I was looking into this, and it's a bit of a mystery for me. I was like, why is my testosterone so high, like off the scale? My free testosterone is not as high because my SHBG was also high, but it's still top third of the scale. And yet I have some of the traits of high testosterone, but I don't have all of the traits. And one of the traits of high testosterone that I felt like I was really lacking is that kind of unflappability, and, it's like still a tendency to anxiety. And, I talked about that, right? Not being able to get to sleep and stuff like that. That's all kind of low-level anxiety stuff. Nothing crazy, nothing more than the average person, but not kind of what you would assume of like a really high testosterone, nothing can faze me kind of guy. So I was like, what is that? How can my testosterone be high and yet I don't seem like it? At least, especially in this regard, right? And so it's an interesting question. It's not what most men have to face, right? Most men are struggling with low testosterone. Mine's like, why am I really high and still don't have some of the benefits of it? So in pursuing the answers to that question, I started to dig into DHT. So DHT is a metabolite of testosterone in the same way that allopregnanolone is a metabolite of progesterone. And the same way, it's not focused on anywhere near as much. But in fact, when DHT is spoken about, it's always in a negative sense. It's always, how can we reduce the conversion of testosterone to DHT? Because DHT is implicated with male pattern baldness, which I have even implicated it with, and it is also implicated with an enlarged prostate. Now, again, recently in the last 6 months or so, my understanding about that has been shaken. I was asked to develop a prostate project, and during the research for that, I was surprised to discover that if DHT is involved in enlarging the prostate at all, it is not as important as we think. And in fact, a much more important factor is estrogen, because estrogen causes growth in general. And men often have really high estrogen, especially when they reach that age when they start to get enlarged prostates. And then there's loads of evidence for it. I'm like, why are all the drugs they're giving for blocking DHT and not blocking estrogen? At least if you felt like it was both, you would do both. But why are you only doing DHT? Especially when DHT is by far the most androgenic substance in the body. And then I was like, you know what? If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say question asked, question answered. Because there does seem to be a bit of a backlash, I guess would be the fairest way of putting it, against masculinity in our culture. And, a lot of people say there was an attempt to reduce the masculinity in the Western world. And so, surprise, surprise, that the hormone DHT, which is the most related to masculine traits, has been demonized. So, if you have low DHT, it turns out you actually have all of the symptoms of low testosterone, but even more. So DHT is what creates, beard growth. It's what creates confidence. It's what creates sex drive. It's what creates the ability to get and maintain an erection. And it's what creates ability to put on muscle. And so all of that stuff, although it's true of testosterone, it's all more true for DHT, because it hits those receptors between 3 and 10 times as strongly as testosterone. So it's like super testosterone, DHT. Only a little bit of testosterone is converted into DHT, but that little is way, way more powerful. So DHT seems like this super substance, and yet it's been blamed for these two issues, and as a result, all the drugs they give you lower DHT. And so I was like, okay. So I was wondering, and then I looked into DHT and I was like, oh, look at that. It's actually a really potent GABA agonist and a really potent dopamine agonist as well. And so my understanding, and again, this is tentative, but it's looking to me like yes, testosterone gives those manly traits. And yes, if a person takes steroids, if they pump themselves full of bioidentical testosterone or do something else to raise testosterone, the illegal steroid stuff, some of it will inevitably be converted into DHT. But the problem is, when you're raising testosterone that much, sure, enough of it gets converted into DHT, you get a lot of the results you want. But actually, a lot of it also gets converted to estrogen. And this is why guys taking steroids, they often have to take estrogen blockers. They have to cycle on and off. They end up with all of these issues, let alone their testicles shrinking and sperm production shutting off and all the things. And I was like, could you just increase DHT without increasing testosterone? Then none of it can be converted to estrogen. You get all the benefits of testosterone. You don't seem to get any of the drawbacks. You apparently get this swollen prostate issue, but actually, I'm not convinced about that anymore. You apparently get male pattern baldness, but I've already got that anyway, so too late. And I can keep an eye on my PSA, which is the prostate thing, to just see. So I also started to supplement with DHT, a specific version called 11-keto DHT. I just put it on my skin, 1 milligram every other day, so a very, very low dose, and oh my God, just fantastic. So all of the being able to relax from the allopregnanolone, but also that fired up energy, like one of the things that I heard, I think it's Andrew Huberman talk about, is that one of the things, the distinctions I heard from him first, I don't know if other people are saying it, is that testosterone makes effort feel good. And as I said, I had high testosterone, off the charts, pretty high free testosterone, top third percentile. So certainly, high by most standards. And yet I wasn't feeling that. I wasn't feeling like I was enjoying effort. I wasn't feeling, especially like physical endurance. I wasn't feeling like low anxiety, all the rest of it. I take tiny bit of DHT. I get all of those benefits and more. And I'm putting on more and more muscle without doing any resistance training. Why am I not doing any resistance training? For those wondering, it's because I'm still doing a detoxification thing at the same time, and it gets in the way of that. And I'm still trying to get tension out of my muscles, and it gets in the way of that. I think eventually I will be doing resistance training. I have nothing against it, but anyway, I'm not doing it, and the muscles seem to be piling on anyway. And so yeah, for men, DHT really seems to be the thing. And so I'm now working on, for that male company, a DHT product that's going to help give the building blocks, the DHEA and the pregnenolone, which are the up the chain version, and then give other nutrients and herbs that make sure that it gets funneled into DHT and not into estrogen and not into cortisol, not into other things that we don't want it to be in. So I'm currently working on that. Maybe it's out by the time you watch the video, so maybe we'll remember to put a link in. Maybe we won't. But yeah, so interesting that. And I suspect now, I'm thinking about our ancestors, back to that original question about they weren't able to take, all of these fancy things, your drugs, your this, the that, and yet they were feeling great, they survived and were happy in, the most incredible conditions. How is that possible? I'm starting to get a taste of it. If your hormone levels are good, then your level of dopamine is good, your level of GABA is good. If you're creating enough cellular energy, like we talked about before, that even better. And then you're good, and then you don't need all of that stuff like we talked about in the last episode. Just like Sadhguru, the spiritual teacher, says, you don't need to think about the meaning of life. You don't need to do affirmations. You don't need to. Now, you might still do a visualization or something just to aim at what you want, right? Just to clarify what you want and then aim at it. That's part of the whole dopamine thing, to set goals and then reach them. Just like our ancient ancestors, the first cave paintings were like pictures of bison and stuff on the wall. That's probably them aiming for what they were going to achieve that day, right? We're going to find a bison and we're going to kill it. And here's a picture. And that helps my brain to, visualize it and see it and all the rest of it. That's great. But we don't need to be, and this was always my issue with music. People who listen to music a lot, it's like they seem to need it just to give them some, like energy, right? Like listening to
some external influence or stimulus that's coming in that then spurs or sparks the state change.
Exactly, yeah. It's using it a bit like a stimulant. I remember that David Goggins, the guy who teaches like ultra, pushing yourself to the limit, warrior, marathon stuff. He said, like if you're listening to music while you're running, it's cheating. Like you need to be fully present. And so that's, God knows how high his testosterone is, but it's that kind of. And I've nothing against music, of course, but, it's all these things, they're kind of props. And sometimes props are useful and music is better than any drugs. And I've been recommending drugs, so I'm not knocking music. But I am saying that, when your level of hormones are optimal, you don't even have to worry about the neurochemistry. That's what I'm starting to realize. All that will sort itself out. And so, but the thing is it possible to be our age, Krissy, and have optimal hormones? I don't know. Maybe our ancestors didn't. There's like it's like your sex hormones are kept high when you're young for you to reproduce. And it's kind of like when you've reproduced or when you're past being able to reproduce, the body just kind of down-regulates it and makes you not as able to function optimally, maybe to make space for the next generation. So we either accept that, we go, you know what, that's life, that's nature, I'm preparing for obsolescence, or we can artificially raise it. That's a choice.
Yeah, we'll go. I mean, our main thing is, we want to live this very vital life and feel good while doing it. That's the impetus for doing it. So it's like, well, yeah, you want to. yeah, you want to feel good. So if you can, let's do it because it's more fun, Yeah, it just seems like a no-brainer. But, like we mentioned earlier, you mentioned there are some other things that can get in the way of that. Can you just make a quick distinction? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Let me just comment on that, the things that get in the way of it. The inevitable decline of the sex hormones that leads to menopause and maybe andropause in men, I'm not convinced about that anymore either, because in other primate species, you don't necessarily see it. Now, they don't tend to live as long as we do, so you could say it's not a fair comparison. But a lot of other primates are actually able to reproduce until, like throughout their lives. And they don't have that precipitous drop-off that we do. Like I say, their lifespan is not as long, so you could say, but I'm not convinced that our ancestors did have that drop-off that we do. And again, I'm not sure, but this is where the detoxification is interesting again. If it's actually genuine and successful, which most detoxification isn't, like how much can we actually optimize if we remove all the poisons that are holding us back, if we make sure we get all the nutrients that we need, including oxygen and CO2 and all these kind of basic sunlight, all the stuff we've talked about in other episodes. If we get all the stuff coming in that we need and we get the stuff out of us that we've got too much of, could the sex hormones actually stay high way, way longer than we currently experience? And, given that menopause is happening earlier and earlier these days to women, and there's perimenopause now and premenopause and all the rest of it, given that's happened within a few decades, I would argue because of toxic exposure overload, could it well be that, back to prehistory, that at least some of us, if we had access to enough nutrients, that we, were able to stay vital and vibrant for, very, very long time? So maybe.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. It really is. And we know our toxic load is getting more and more and more. Just quickly on the Allop and the DHT that you were talking about, would you take them both? I mean, would it just be the women would take the Allop, the men would take the DHT, or can you talk a little bit about that so there's no confusion?
It's a good question. I'm currently having both, and I'm having more of the Allop. Is that a good idea? I don't know. Time will tell. So I'm a bit on the cutting edge of this investigation. I'm not the first, though. There's a bunch of people I'm in contact with who've been doing it for a long time. I don't see any downside to doing both for both. I think you just find the level, except for with the DHT for women, it has such a strong androgenic effect that the amount that you would have as a woman, if you had any, would be tiny. So as where I might have 0.5 milligram equivalent a day, you might have 0.05 milligram or even less. And even then, you might feel better, but there's a risk you might get beard growth and stuff like that. So as a woman, I wouldn't bother.
I don't want to mess with that. No,
yeah.
Thanks.
I would go the avenue of Allop and increasing dopamine with the other stuff I've said. As a man, I don't see any reason not to do both because I don't see any evidence at all that the converse is true. Basically, masculine traits come from testosterone. Feminine traits come from estrogen, not from progesterone. So I don't see any reason why a progesterone metabolite would overly feminize a man. But hey, maybe I'll end up being wrong, but it certainly doesn't look like it. There's no evidence that it does.
Wonderful. So do you want to go into some more of the things for raising GABA naturally, or where would you like to take us on this journey with you so far from where you've come?
Yeah, because the two things that I've said, people to look into, but they're extremely hard to get, and I'm not going to recommend where to get them because I don't want to be responsible in case anything goes wrong. To be honest, you're just gonna have to look for it. Sorry. And again, if we end up doing some private group, I probably would do it in there, but certainly not publicly. So let me talk about less risky and more easily available ways of raising GABA. So first of all, the building blocks, right? So we said dopamine is made out of tyrosine or phenylalanine. GABA is made out of glutamine and or glycine. Those are the amino acids that it would take to boost it. Some people love glutamine. I'm not a fan of it because I feel like for me, and I think it happens to a lot of people, the glutamine actually gets turned into glutamate. And if you're wondering Why have I heard of that before? MSG, monosodium glutamate. So as much as GABA and glycine are calming neurotransmitters, glutamate is actually the primary excitatory neurotransmitter in the body. Different from a stress chemical. Stress is like utilizing energy in certain ways, but glutamate is just like, let's turn everything up. So I'm not a fan of glutamine for that reason. I much prefer glycine as the amino acid precursor. All of the nutrients that I said before pretty much are the same. So B vitamins, magnesium, zinc. I'm not sure about iron actually, but all the others exactly the same for that conversion of the amino acid to GABA. But it's much less of a difficult conversion. It's much more direct. Both GABA and glycine are actually classified as amino acids directly. They're not, well, they are also neurotransmitters, but basically tyrosine is an amino acid, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's simple. In the case of glycine, it's both already. In the case of GABA, it's both already. So it's a bit more of a direct conversion. Now, herbs are pretty good for this as well. I didn't give any herbs for increasing dopamine because I don't find any of them to be good enough. There is mucuna, which is primarily consists of L-dopa. L-dopa is basically like a step in between tyrosine and dopamine. It's a more direct precursor. So in terms of herbs for tyrosine, you could certainly give that. There are other ones as well. I just don't recommend them because I don't find they're as effective. They often have that same issue of downregulation, whereas the herbs of GABA, I don't find that same issue. So I will recommend some herbs. I'll recommend ashwagandha. Now, interestingly, ashwagandha also increases dopamine. So it does both. It reduces cortisol, increases GABA, and it increases dopamine. At least it hits some of the receptors. So ashwagandha, I'm a big fan of. I take it every night. We do want to feel younger. It's good. There's L-theanine. We don't sell this, but I recommend it. It's another amino acid. It's very good at increasing the activity of GABA. It also increases dopamine as well, while reducing some other ones that are not good. So big fan of L-theanine. I like to take it at night. And phosphatidylserine. Again, we don't sell that, unfortunately, at the time of recording this anyway. But it increases GABA, it lowers cortisol, and increases dopamine. So again, it's a good combination. I'm a big fan of having those three together at night. Now, if your cortisol is low, you probably don't want to take phosphatidylserine. That's really only for people. It's so powerful at reducing cortisol, especially if you have a big dose, that you don't want to overdo it with that one. But ashwagandha and L-theanine are a good combination. I still take them now just out of habit. I don't know if I really still need them because the Allop and the DHT are so much more effective, but they got loads of other benefits. They're in my cupboard. Why not? I don't know if I'll restock them. I'll see. Now, there's one more thing that I'll recommend when it comes to GABA. This is not for daily use. This is either for occasional recreational use because it's, you know, not as poisonous as alcohol, or if someone's in a right state, right? If they're overwhelmed and they're actually making themselves more ill with, you know, anxiety, this could be a good thing to break the cycle of that and just calm them down. But this does downregulate. So I prefer this to alcohol or Xanax or Valium. It has a similar effect, nowhere near as poisonous, but still dangerously addictive if a person is so inclined. And it's called Phenibut. Phenibut. It's sold as a supplement. I don't know why it's sold as a supplement rather than a controlled substance. I mean, it's not as powerful as like a Xanax, but it's definitely along that spectrum. I feel like I have it in my cupboard. I think I've used it like once to try and then maybe one other time on someone else. I don't want to use it, but I think it's good to have if you're the kind of person who has panic attacks and you start to feel it coming on. If you're the kind of person who, you know, can't get to sleep and maybe you just have a little bit occasionally to calm you down. But again, I would stress with this one, occasional. But it's downregulating, but I realize a bunch of people watching this, they may take Xanax, they may take Ambien, they may take these things. I would definitely prefer it to those things. So as I said, nothing I'm going to recommend is side effect free. but everything I recommend will be better than what you're already taking. And if you're already taking nothing, then don't do it. But this is a better alternative.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Well, Ellen, I know that there is more that we do need to discuss along your story, but I know our time is where we're at. So do you want to just kind of give us a little tease for what's coming next?
Well, we talked about serotonin. I don't know if we'll do it in the next episode. We'll think about it afterwards. But at some point, I definitely want to get into serotonin. I want to get into endocannabinoids and endorphins and how they relate to that. I'll just quickly add in with oxytocin. How does that fit in? Because I've been talking about it a lot until this episode. Oxytocin is a heart opener. I have to admit though that with that GABA dopamine thing, I often forget the oxytocin. Like it has become downgraded as a secondary thing because of how effective these two in combination are, along with speeding up the metabolism. Still nothing negative to say about it. But yeah, in case you're wondering, it's I put it in whatever fourth place after those three in terms of importance. Still up there though. And in terms of the other stuff, yeah, we'll talk about it. I especially want to talk about serotonin. One more thing I'll add, just with the tyrosine. I don't like to give dosages because obviously it depends on the person, but I will give one tip for the tyrosine. So whatever meal you eat, how you feel will be partially influenced by the ratio of amino acids that you have. And so, for instance, if you have a bone broth meal where most of the protein is coming from bone broth, there's a lot of glycine in bone broth. And so therefore a bone broth protein-based meal would be quite calming because it would stimulate a lot of GABA. In contrast, I like to have tyrosine with every breakfast and every lunch because it stimulates dopamine. So they say with tyrosine to have it on an empty stomach because amino acids compete for absorption. That is true, and that is a reason why you might want to have it on an empty stomach. But also think about every meal you have, depending on the amino acid profile, it's going to have an effect on your neurotransmitters. So if you want to stimulate dopamine, if you don't want to feel sleepy after lunch like a lot of people do, either eat more high tyrosine proteins with your meal or just add a bit of tyrosine to your meal. That will increase the amount of dopamine that you experience as a result of your meal, and it will kind of counterbalance the other ones. And this is especially important if you supplement protein anyway. Like some people add branch chain amino acids to their meal, if they're, fitness people, bodybuilding people. If you do that, that's going to compete with tyrosine. And so that will make the dopamine that you get from your meal even lower. So especially if you already add creatine or whatever, any other amino acids to the meal, be aware that's diluting the tyrosine. So if you want to boost your dopamine, boost your tyrosine with every meal. That's my final tip. And then other than that, thank you for watching. Thank you for your patience. This might end up being our longest one ever. And of course, let me know your feedback. Have you tried the stuff I'm recommending? Did it work for you? Did it not? We'd love to hear it.
Wonderful. Yes. And thank you all so much for joining us. And remember to stay tuned for the next episode where we'll continue talking more about Elwin's story and all of his discoveries. So please make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you don't miss another episode. And we will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, I want to tell you about a way that you can support the podcast while also getting great deals on high quality supplements that Elwin and I personally use, and that's Feel Younger. What I love about Feel Younger is that they have great quality products with minimal fillers at a very affordable price. You can call their customer support team 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and in my experience, they're very helpful and friendly. And the thing I love most of all is the amazing descriptions that Elwin has written about each product category on that topic. And each product has so much education on it that I've actually learned more from reading the descriptions than I have from a lot of articles. So to support the podcast, please use Feel Younger for all your supplement needs. And to let them know we sent you, use promo code RejuvenateMe for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. That's 20% off your first order using promo code RejuvenateMe at feelyounger.net.